So the next assignment will be due
It's on, yes.
by 24th. All right.
Yes, for this one, because you wouldn't have a class um, during the Thanksgiving week, right? You wouldn't. But what I want the notes by next week, Friday. But if you want to give me the following week because you want break, then fine. You have up to the following week to do it. All right? You know what I mean? Up to the following week to
All
hand
right.
me those.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, right, no problem. Well, this class now is session 9, and we're going to be looking at the preparation for and the unveiling of the covenant. And we are in chapter 19 to begin with. All right, so we're going to start with chapter 19 and then move on, and then we will see what becomes of this afterwards. All right. Now, at this point in Exodus, we are basically at midpoint at this part of the book. Let me do something here. Okay, yeah, great. Okay, now at this part of the book, we are at the midpoint. We're at the peak of the book, chapter 19. All right, and what chapter 19 does here is, well, the book can be divided into two parts. All right, 1 to 20, and then 20 to 40, I believe. All right. Okay. Now here's the point. Chapter 19, then, as I said, is the peak of the book, the midpoint of the book. Why? There's a balance between the first half of the book and the second half of the book. Now, what is the first half of the book about? The first half of the book is about God's act of redemption. Okay, it's about God's act of redemption. That's the first aspect of the book. And what we have in the first half, we have the birth of the nation in terms of them developing, they being in Egypt, they're being redeemed out of Egypt. That's the first aspect of the book. Chapter 19 gives us a break in one sense. All right, it gives us a break, and we go into in chapter 20 down to the end of the book. We have the second half. And what does the second half deal with? The second half deals with the giving of the law, or the inauguration of the covenant, the building of the temple, the building and consecration of the temple, and it deals with God's dwelling among them. So whereas in chapter 1 to 19 or 18, put it that way, is redemption out of Egypt, chapter 20 down has to do with the giving of the covenant, the building of the tabernacle, consecration of the tabernacle, and all of that. That's chapters up to chapter 40. And there now in chapter 19 is that midpoint. All right. Look at chapter 19 and verse 4. Chapter 19 and verse 4, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. That verse 4 basically captures what went before in the first half of the book. So it looks backward. You have seen what I've done to you. I brought you out on eagle's wings. All right. So that's looking backward. Now, also, chapter 19 also looks forward. So if we look at verse 6, here is what we have in verse 6. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel. So chapters 1 to 19, or chapters 1 to 18, I have brought you out of Egypt with eagle's wings. Chapter 20 down to the end of the book, I have, you are now a kingdom of priests. All right. So it points to the future. Now, look at Isaiah 42 and verse 6 and Isaiah 49 and verse 6. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 42 and verse 6, and then Isaiah 49 and verse 6. And any of you that have that can read it. All right, Isaiah.
42:6. I,
Mhm.
the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will hold your hand. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the Gentiles.
All right, okay. 49 6. Okay, 49 6 of Isaiah.
It reads, Indeed, he says, it is too small a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved ones of Israel. I will also give you as a light to the Gentiles, that you should be my salvation to ends of the earth.
All right. So the point here is that in creating them as a nation, in creating them as a kingdom of priests, as a covenant people, their mission was to be a light to the Gentiles, right? That's what they were called to be. They were called to be God's salvation to the rest of the world, to the nations around them, to bring the light of God's salvation to them. All right. Now, so what do we have in chapter 19? If we are going to outline chapter 19, we can look at chapter 19 in this way, and I'm going to look at it in different ways. First of all, um, we have in chapter 19, verses 3 to 8, we have the preparation for the enactment of the covenant, verses 3 to 8. They're being prepared now to put the covenant in place, that is God. So we're about now to see the covenant becoming a reality in verses 3 to 8. Now, between verses 8 to 15, 1, and verse 16 to verse 25, the end of the chapter, in those two sections, that is 8 to 6, 8 to 15 and 16 to 25, we have the first of Moses's 7 ascents on Mount Sinai. So these verses, they are recording the first of the 7 journeys that Moses will make to the mountain. And not only that, what we have here in these verses is in verse 5. If we look at 19:5, 19:5 says, now therefore now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, You shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. Now, what is it that we have here in verse 5? In verse 5, there is the call to obedience. If you will obey my voice, if you will heed to what I say, if you're going to obey my voice, then you're going to be this. So that's verse 5 talks about the call to obedience. All right. And along with that call to obedience comes the blessings. If you obey my voice, then this is what you will get. All right. Now, when we come to the second ascent, that is the second time Moses is going up to the mountain, that is between verses 8 and 15. What we have in this case is arrangements are being made for them to receive the covenant. That's verse 18, 8 to 15. We won't read all of that for time's sake. We can read that on your own. But 8 to 15, it is an arrangement. We see arrangements being put in place for the covenant to be given. That's verses 8 to 15. When we come now to the third time that Moses is going up into the mountain in verses 18 to 25, what we have is the awesome intensity of the announcement of the covenant. So this is where now you're going to have dread and fear and all of that, right? So don't come to the mountain and all of that. So there is going to be the announcement is going to show the holiness of God. All right. So as I said, that is going to be from verses 16 to 25. Now, why is verse 19 such a central point in the book? As I said, it is the midpoint of the book. All right. But now, what we can do, since we are now at the midpoint, we can look at the book from verse 19 to 25. That's where we're going to go from here on in. We have looked at 1 to 18. Now we're looking at 19 to 25, chapters 19 to 25. That's a broad category of one aspect. Then within that 19 to 25, we're going to have certain specific things being done. And I'm looking now at how the rest of the book is shaped and how central chapter 19 is. All right. Remember now, we're looking at chapters 19 to 25. What do we have in these sections, 19 to 25? One, we're going to have the 10 commandments, the declaration of the covenant, beginning with the 10 commandments in chapter 20. Now that is the 10 commandments, the declaration of the covenant, the 10 commandments. That's going to run from chapter 20 to 31. And this is very, very, very important. I'll tell you why it's important. When we think of the covenant, well, not we, but when many persons think of the covenant and what God gave at Sinai, most people think that it is only chapter 20 where the laws come, not realizing that the giving of the law stretches from chapter 20 to chapter 24. All of that is the giving of the law. it is not only in chapter 20. All right. So what do we have from 20 to about chapter 24? That's the whole giving of the law. What is that going to include when we get to chapter 30? And I'm not missing out 25, 6, 7, 8. I'm not missing that out. But when we come to chapter 30, in other words, let's put it this way. From chapter 20, we can say the declaration of the law, the 10 commandments and all of that will stretch from chapter 20 to chapter 31. Good? Hope I'm not confusing you. I'm saying that many persons think that the law is just in chapter 20. I'm saying no. When you look at the book and how the book is organized, the giving of the law is going to stretch, watch this now, from chapter 20 to about chapter 31. All of that is the giving of the law. All right? What do we have in chapter 30? We have in chapter 30 the civil, watch this, the civil and the religious law, or those laws being given in chapter 30. In chapter 30, we're also going to be given the blueprint for the tabernacle. Remember, I'm saying that from 20 to 31, all of that is giving of the law. Specifically, chapter 20 is the 10 commandments. But there are other laws that will stretch to chapter 31. When we get to chapter 30 in particular, it has to do with the civil religious laws and the blueprint for the tabernacle. That's chapter 30. When we come to chapter 31, we're going to have 3 charges, 3 orders, 3 stipulations, 3 demands that God is going to give them in chapter 31. What are those 3 demands? 1, build the tabernacle. 2, keep the Sabbath. And 3, observe the 10 commandments. Sorry. So there are, in chapter 31, there are 3 charges. Build the tabernacle, because that's where I am going to dwell with you. Keep the Sabbath, that's where you are going to be resting and honoring me. And in same chapter 31, the 10 commandments, this is how you are going to live. Those are the 3 charges in chapter 31. Okay, we're looking at how the rest of the book is going to flow. When we get to chapter 32 to chapter 34, there is going to be a significant moment in their life. What do we have here in chapters 32 to chapter 34? We're going to have this incident with the golden calf and the breaking of the covenant in chapters 32 to 34. From chapter 35 down to chapter 40, we have the building and dedication of the tabernacle. All right. Have I confused? Is this clear? Do you want me to go over anything? Is that in terms of how the book is going to flow from here and into the end? Any questions, any comments? Make sense? Clear? Okay, great. All right. Now, what I want to do is to go to back to chapter 19, because that's where we are, and we're going to do a breakdown of the text of chapter 19.
Hey Eddie.
Yes, yes, Chip.
So you said there were specific things being done, and then we started getting into that list, and then did we complete that list, or
For which one?
19 through 25, there were specific things that were being done. You started listing 10 commandments, the giving of the law, and then we kind of stopped with the numbered stuff. So
Okay.
did I miss something or not number something correctly, or what?
No. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I missed something. What I'm saying. All right, and I'm glad you asked the question, Jim. When we look at from here on in, from chapter 19 through to the end of the book, there are some significant moments. So if we look from chapter 19 to 25, what we have in those chapters is the setting and the basis for the covenant. All right? I am saying, looking from 19 to 40, within 19 to 40 will come the setting of the and the basis for the covenant in chapters 19 to 25. The law does not end in chapter 20. That's just the 10 commandments.
31.
It goes from chapter 20 right down to chapter 31. All right? So when we get to chapter 30 to 31, 20 to 31, what we're having is the declaration of the covenant. What do we have in those declarations? In chapter 20, we have the 10 commandments, stretching to chapter 31, the law, right? Specifically, the 10 commandment comes in chapter 20. But when we look at chapter 30, as we move, we're going to see building of the tabernacle, religious and the civil laws, right up to 30. When we get to 31, he's going to give them 3 charges: keep the law, build the tabernacle, observe the Sabbath, right? From 32 and 34, they're going to have the golden calf and they're going to break the covenant. From 35 to 40, there is going to be a building and a dedication of the tabernacle. All right, and that's how it flows. So it's not that you have missed out anything. All right, okay. Now let's look at the exit, how we're going to analyze chapter 19 now. Could somebody read verses 1 to 3 for me? I'm 19.
In the 3rd month after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. When they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. And there Israel camped in front of the mountain. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the sons of Israel."
All right, okay. So now this is plotting the journey. So they're on the Sinai Peninsula. Now Moses is now going to go up into the mountain. All right. Now, what you're going to find if we look at Numbers chapter 10. Look at Numbers chapter 10. Let me point out something to you. Numbers chapter 10. And look at verse 11. All right. Numbers 10 and verse 11. In the 2nd year, in the 2nd month, in the 20th day of the month, the cloud lifted from over the tabernacle of the testimony. You know what this is saying? That Moses spent almost a year. Remember this. Moses spent almost a year on Mount Sinai. Remember that. I'm going to remind you that later on. Not now, not today, but I want to remind you that. All right? He is in with the Lord for that long. Okay. Now, what we find in verse 3 of 19 is that Moses goes up into the mountain, and what he receives in verses 3 to verse 6, he receives the message from God. What's the message? While Moses went up to God, the Lord called him out of the mountain, saying, "This is what you will say to the house of Jacob and to the house of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I brought you out on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, therefore," so God is now saying, this, Moses, is what I want you to tell the people. Before, in Moses going up to the mountain, God says, Moses, this is what I want you to tell the people. I want you to follow me. And what it suggests is that even he's calling him up into the mountain, even before Moses reached mountain top. God is saying, this is what I want you to keep in mind, to tell the people. I'm doing this because of what I have done for them. All right? So, what do we have between verses 4 and 9? Moses now calls the people. He calls the children of Israel in verse 3. He tells them what the Lord has done in verse 4. He tells them what the Lord requires of them in verse 5. What the Lord promises to do. And he tells the elders that in verse 7 to 8. So Moses is telling the entire congregation. All right? What's the message? The message is, I have brought you out on eagle's wings. Now, what does that suggest, you think? What is God saying to Moses when he says, I brought you out on eagle's wings? What is it what do you associate that with? Any thoughts?
I was I
Freedom.
was I was thinking with the in Revelation 12:14
Mm-hmm.
when it says that God gave two wings to the woman to escape. It was nourished, and I was thinking about that, how that represents protection.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. That's one concept of it. That's very good. It is the idea that God has protected you. There's another thing. You're right, David. Very right. It is the protection, but there's another aspect of God that we see here that would be similar to protection. Anybody else has any ideas?
I mean, on eagle's wings
That
makes me
it
think
was
of freedom.
only by his power that were redeemed.
Okay, one, so there's protection, there is power. All right, perfect. There's another idea that we can get from this, bearing you out on eagle's wings. Chip, you were going to say something.
I was just saying freedom. When I think of a bird flying, I think of nothing holding you back anymore.
All right. Okay, I can take that. Yeah, yeah. But the word I'm looking for is care. The idea I'm looking for is compassion, power, yes, freedom, but there's also the care of God. That God is taking them out on eagle's wings. We see God's strength, we see God's protection, we see God's care, we see them taking their flight out of. All right, look at Deuteronomy 32 and verse 11. All right, Deuteronomy 32:11 says, like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that flutters over its young, spreading out fruits, spreading out its wings, catching them, bearing them on its pinions. You see that? How the eagle is just moving with the young one, protecting them, caring for them, making them move with them, like the flight concept, and also the care. That's God to the Israelites. All right. And God says, Moses, I want you to tell them that. That's not what I did for them. All right. So now, what is God in this aspect? Back to chapter 19. What is God doing in this aspect? God promises Israel that you are going to be my treasured possession. You are going to be prized above any other nation. I have chosen you to be my personal treasure. All right. Now, I want us to look at some of these verses, please. Go to Deuteronomy. I want you to look at these verses. Look at Deuteronomy 7, verse 6 to 9. One of you could get that. Another person in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 4 to 6. And another person, Deuteronomy 10, 14 to 16. All right, watch this. Deuteronomy 7, 6 to 9, Deuteronomy 9, 4 to 6, and Deuteronomy 10, 4 to 16. And as after we've read all three passages, I want you to, talk to me about what is it that together these three passages are saying. All right. Anybody with Deuteronomy 7, Deuteronomy 9, Deuteronomy 10? Who has
Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6
to
to
9?
9.
Yes.
For you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people of himself, a special treasure above all peoples on the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you or not chosen you because you were more in number than any other people, for you were the least of all peoples. But because of the Lord loves you, and because he would keep the oath which he has sworn to your fathers, the Lord has brought you out of a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of bondage, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Verse 9. Therefore, know that the Lord your God, he is God, and the faithful God who keeps covenant and mercy for 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandments.
All right. Okay. Next passage, chapter 9, verse 4 to 6.
Deuteronomy 9, 4 to 6 says, do not say in your heart when the Lord your God has driven them out before you. Because of my righteousness, the Lord has brought me in to his he has brought me in to possess this land, but it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is dispossessing them before you. It is not for your righteousness or for the uprightness of your heart that you are going to possess their land, but it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God is driving them out before you, in order to confirm the oath which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Know then, it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stubborn people.
All right. Chapter 10, verse 14 to 16. Yeah, chapter 10, verse 14 to 16.
Behold, to the Lord your God belong heaven and the highest heavens, the earth and all that is in it. Yet on your fathers did the Lord set his affection to love them, and he chose their descendants after them, even you above all peoples, as it is this day. So circumcise your heart and stiffen your neck no longer.
All right. Those are the verses, right? Yeah,
You
that's
want
the
the
end of
next verse?
16.
17 is, for the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God who does not show partiality nor take a bribe.
All right. Okay. What is it that you find common to all of these passages?
That
Together, what are these passages? Yes, Chip.
the Israelites are God's chosen people,
Mm-hmm.
and that they did nothing to be chosen.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
All
thing I
right.
saw in these three verses.
Okay. Anybody else?
I
David?
like
Yeah.
the fact. I
God's
like the fact.
faithfulness to
Go ahead,
All
Patrick.
right. Go ahead, Patrick.
yeah God's faithfulness to the covenant that he had with the fathers of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what you see.
Being the sole reason why he created them.
Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Good. David.
Well, I like the reminder that he does with them, reminding them that it's not because of you. You are the least ones. It's just because I made this covenant before. So I like that is like, yes, I love you, but don't be exalted.
Yeah. Okay. Don't exalt yourself. Okay. Fine. Um, Emmanuel, what you say?
Well, I see God's unconditional love towards the nation Israel, and how his covenants, he's protecting his covenants since he's promised Abraham that he will be with him to the end of the age. And
Mm-hmm.
also how faithful he is and merciful to the nation Israel. And
Mm-hmm.
the law that he has chosen them. Since he has chosen them, he himself is protecting them from all whatever their stubbornness that they did. Still, he is faithful unto his promise.
All right. Okay. Here is it now. Good. Right. Perfect. What we see here, and all of you are right, is that God made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God is going to be true and faithful to that covenant that promise that he made to their forefathers. Israel, it has nothing to do with how righteous you are. It has nothing to do with your size. In fact, if I were going to choose somebody based on righteousness, it wouldn't be you, because you are stubborn. So you would, if the criterion is going to be being loyal, being committed, being obedient, it wouldn't be you because you are stubborn, right? If it had to do with size, it couldn't be you because you are the smallest. So I am making a covenant with you, entering a relationship with you because of the promise I made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, here is the point. You can benefit as a people from that promise, and I'm going to keep my commitment to you in that covenant on one condition. You're going to be my prized possession. You're going to be my treasured possession on one condition. What is that? That you obey the commandments that I'm going to give to Moses now. You are going to have to obey them. If you don't, I'm going to cut you off. As long as you are obedient to the covenant that we are going to enter now, then you will be blessed, and I will protect you as I did taking you out from Egypt on eagle's wings. That's God to them. Now, I want to suggest that there are two key elements here that we see as a preparation for the covenant. Two important things. One, there is obligation, right? There is covenant commitment, obligation. Good? You are obligated to do this because this is the covenant that we're going to enter.
Conditional.
Conditional, exactly, right? But secondly, the covenant is going to have expectation or stipulation. So in this covenant that we're going to enter, there is one obligation on your part, commitment. There's an expectation. There is a obligation on your part. But also, there are some stipulations. There are some expectations that you are going to have to meet, that I am going to set. Why? Because it is not you that's redeeming yourself, it's me. Because you couldn't do it. I was the one who brought you out on Egypt wings. I was the one who brought you out. I redeemed you, not you. You see what I'm saying? So here we have now the basis of the covenant agreement that we're going to have, that God is saying to them. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 17 to 19. Deuteronomy 26, verses 17 to 19. All right? Now, Deuteronomy, I said verses 26 to 26, 17 to 9. All right? Okay. In fact, read from verse 16 through to verse 19.
This day the Lord your God commands you to observe these statutes and judgments. Therefore you shall be careful to observe them with all your heart and with all your souls. Today you have proclaimed the Lord to be your God. and that you will walk in his ways and keep his statutes, his commandments and his judgments, and that you will obey his voice.
Right on
18.
tonight. Mhm.
Also today the Lord has proclaimed you to be his special people, just as he promised you that you should keep all his commandments. Amen.
All right. Verse 19. Verse 19.
And that he will set you high above all nations which he has made, in his praise, in name, and in honor, and that you may be a holy people to the Lord your God, just as he has spoken.
All right. Here is God to them. I am giving you statutes. I'm giving you rules. I'm giving you commandments. Keep them. Keep them. And if you keep them, you will be my treasured possession. You with me? Now, here is, go back to chapter 19, verse 5. There is a condition here, as we said. Now, they're made a kingdom of priests. They're the treasured possession from all the people of the earth. They're going to be a priestly kingdom. Watch this. Now, Israel, national Israel, is no longer a priestly kingdom. That's not God's people today. That's not God's kingdom of priests today. Do you know who is God's kingdom of priests today? Who would be God's kingdom of priests today?
The church.
A Christian.
Good. All right. That's Emmanuel says the church, right? That's what you said.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Here's my point. Prove it. Prove it.
According to First Peter chapter 5, verse 9, said,
Mhm.
you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood.
Mhm. Let me see if 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 9 says that. Verse 9 of chapter 5. Resisting firm in your faith, knowing that's 5:9. You sure?
Oh,
You sure it didn't mean another chapter? Help me out, somebody. You sure it didn't mean 2? Chapter 2?
chapter 2, verse 9.
All right. Okay, let's hear it. Oh, you quoted it well. Yes. So the church now is the kingdom of priests. Yes, that's what 1 Peter 2:9 says. But there's another one. Revelations 1:7. All right. That's how I am, Emmanuel. Right. Look at chapter 1, verse 7.
Verse 7 says, behold, he is coming with clouds, and every eye will see him, even they who pierce him, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn because of him. Even so, amen.
All right. Okay, baby. No, I am giving you the wrong passage. Let me see the one I want in Revelation. I don't think it's 1:7 I want.
1:6.
Yeah, let me hear 1:6. I think it's 1:6. Yeah. Let me hear 1:6. Yes, it's
And he
1:16.
has made us kings and priests to his God and Father. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen.
So the church now is God's kingdom of kings and priests, meaning us who are Christians. Here is something I want you to keep in mind. Under the Old Testament system, a king was not a priest. The offices were separate. A king was
Hello,
not a priest.
hello,
Yes,
Eddie.
yes.
Please, would you care to add Chip? Chip lost his internet. He would want to get back on stage.
Oh, well, Mike is the person who will have to take him back on. Um, um, Mike will have to be all right. All right. I
Yeah,
okay.
he said we
I
should move
understand.
on whilst
Yeah. Okay.
he
Right.
stays
Yeah.
in the backstage.
He's in the background. Okay. Yes. All right. Okay. So here's my point. Under the Old Testament, the two offices were separate. In Jesus Christ, we are kings and priests. That's what the church is now, the kingdom of priests. And so our responsibility is to show forth the praises of him who has called us out of darkness into light. All right. So now when we get to chapter 19 again, we're going now. I won't read verses 10 to 21 um, for the sake of time. And as I said, you will um, have to keep that for your do that on your own. What these verses show, what they record, is what Israel is now going to become. Israel is now going to become a theocracy. All right? Because God is shaping them into a nation ruled by his laws. Um, I want you to see something. I'll just mention some of these verses because there is the theocracy that the kingdom, that the people are now going to be ruled by divine laws. But there's also going to be what we see in here is what is known as a theophany. Theophany. All right. And it's TEHOPHONY, a theophany. Okay. And that is the appearance of God. All right. Now, between verses 10 and 21, what we have is the appearance of God. So there is verse 16, there is lightning and thunder. There's a thick cloud. Moses is brought the people out of the camp to meet God. All right, verse 18. Moses is wrapped in the smoke because of God descending with the fire. There is a smoke. Verse 19, the sound of the trumpet. Moses is speaking and God is answering him in a thunder. Verse 20, the Lord comes down on Mount Sinai at the top of the mountain, and the Lord calls him to the top of the mountain, and Moses goes up. When we get to verse 21, and the Lord said to Moses, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to the Lord to look, and many of them perish. So this is the case now where there is the thick cloud, the fire, the lightning and the thunder, because God, in his um, power and might and grandeur and all of that, he is descending and he's speaking to Moses. Now, here are some things. Does this sound familiar to you? The Hebrew writer makes a reference to this when he contrasts the two mountains. in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 18 to 21. All right. And it's good to contrast these two mountains because while they could not go and touch the mountain, while they could not approach the mountain, Exodus 19, in the church, in fact, let's read verses 12, chapter 12, verse 18 to 21 of um of Hebrews. Hebrews 12, 18 to 21.
For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who hear it beget that the word should not be spoken to them any more. For they could not endure what was commanded. And if so much as the beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned or shot with an arrow. And so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I am exceedingly afraid and trembling.
All right. So you see the difference now um, with the mountain Sinai and coming to Mount Zion in Hebrews chapter 12. Now, um, so the covenant now is being made with the children of Israel. All right. Now, here is what we're going to do. Um, you all might have thought that we're going to come back to the covenant and all of that because we're going to come back to that later on. We're going to look at chapter 20 to 31 later on, but we're going to look at the unveiling of the covenant. But you know what I want us to do now? You are supposed to have read some things for me. Remember? Silence. How many of us got the chance to
Yeah,
look?
sure, sure. The covenant.
Yes. How many of us got the chance to look at that paper? Not many? All right.
I did. I read through.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Um, the let's now look at um the covenant. You want to tell me what you have?
All right. Okay. Um, I made a little notes here. Yeah. So it's basically about the two kinds of covenants that we can read from in the Bible, and
Mhm.
its relation to the ancient world also having a covenant, especially with the Hittite community as the empire. So the two kinds of covenants in there is a covenant between two equals. That is named as parity agreement or parity covenant.
Mhm.
Then there's another kind of covenant that is between um, a lord and its vessel. So that means in this kind of covenant, there's a higher being or authority versus um, a lowly being or a weaker um, party.
Mhm.
But the um, broader or the bigger definition for these two covenants comes from two words in the Hebrew and the Greek word. The Hebrew has it as beret, which can be a treaty, a pact, agreement, obligation, and covenant. Then, when the Hebrew was translated into the Greek by the as in the Septuagint, it was translated to the Atike, which actually brought the meaning of a testament and a will, in addition to the berit in the Hebrew word. So there are about 6 things that characterize covenant or testament. First, there should be a preamble that lays the foundation or the beginning of the covenant. Then there should be a prologue, more like a history about the relationship or the parties involved. Then comes the should I say what is required? Stipulations, yeah. What is required of the treaty. Then comes the sanctions. What happens when one fails to go by it, and also what the party stands to gain. So it's more like punishment and reward for the covenant. Then the other thing is how would this covenant travel through time or through generations? That is the succession plan.
Okay.
Then
Anything else?
the witnesses
Sorry.
for the parties. Then we would see these two covenants interspersed in the Bible, but the major vassal treaty or the covenant is the Mountain Sinai covenant that God had with the people of Israel. Then there are several examples of human to human covenants, that of Rahab and the spies, David and Jonathan, David and Abner, Abraham and Ephron. Then not forgetting the marriage covenant between man and woman. Then there could also be covenant between kings, that means of equal stature. So that would be one of the parity agreements. You would have Nebuchadnezzar and Judah, and the Gibeonite covenant. That's the Gibeonites deceiving Israel to make a covenant with them whilst they were on their way to Canaan. Then there are other kinds of it too, which is metaphorical. Like Job made a covenant with his eyes not to see unrighteous stuffs. So that one is also a kind of a covenant, but it's with things other than humans. So he made a covenant with his eyes. Then I think the last had to do with I think I read something about covenant of salt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
in other words,
I think basically that's what I.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Good. Very good. We won't get into the New Testament because the article also talks about the New Testament covenant, right? And looked at the difference between the old covenant and the new covenant, but we're not going there yet. But very good. What I'm going to encourage everybody else to do is to actually read that paper. All right. What you thought of the paper, Patrick? What did you think? Learned anything much? I mean, did it benefit one?
In fact, it's bridges the gap between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Previously, it looked like it's just a book with names, but now it's this. I mean, people actually connects the two covenants in such a way that the book cannot.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it gives a very deeper meaning of the two books.
All right. So you did find it useful then.
Very useful. Very, very,
Okay.
very,
All
very useful.
right. Okay. So the rest of us, if we have the time to look at it, would you need to look at it, because it will give you really a basis, a very good basis of um, the covenant, and it will give you a better understanding of the covenant that we're talking about here, in this case the Sinaitic covenant. All right, I want to go over some things that Patrick said, and that was very good, Patrick, very, very good. So we need to understand what a covenant is. All right. So if there is, let me go to my syllabus. There is on the one of the papers that you need to write, if you choose to write that, question 3. Summarize the main components of a covenant. What are the basic terms of the covenant as presented in the covenant given in the Sinaitic covenant? Right? A lot of repetition of covenant there. But that, if you choose to write on that paper, this article would be a very important one to reference, along with other things that you know about and that you can find about a covenant. So when we talk about a covenant, we're basically talking about an agreement. Okay, we're talking about some ideas, like, for instance, we're talking about a treaty. All right, we're talking about a pact, and so in this case, the as Patrick pointed out, it it is basically a solemn promise between two individuals. All right. Now, the other point that I think is important that we want to look at is, I want us to, what the article pointed out, what I'm pointing out here, is that there are different types of covenant, and this is important for us to get. There are important kinds of covenant. All right. Um, there is the first one is what is called a parity agreement, and you need to note that, right? That's important. It's a parity agreement, kind of a covenant, and that is, as was pointed out by Patrick, that it has to do with an agreement between two equals. All right, that's a parity agreement. There is a second agreement, second kind of covenant, and that is what is called a vassal treaty. Vassal treaty, and that is VASSAL, a vassal treaty. All right. Sometimes it's called a suzerain treaty, and you spell that SUZERAINTY. That kind of a suzerainty, suzerain treaty, or a vassal treaty, and that is where there is a treatment, a treaty between the Lord and his subjects. All right, that's the kind of treaty that is vassal treaty. Now, I want us to this would be familiar to Patrick, because he read this stuff. But I want you to take this note down. And I want to see this in the notes that you present to me. All right. When we look at a covenant, the covenant, the agreement, the pact, whatever, is going to follow a particular structure, right? And you need to know what the structure is. At least be able to identify the structure to see how this covenant, the structure of a covenant, fits into the Sinaitic covenant that Moses is making, that God is making now with the children of Israel, how it is going to link and the similarities between the two. All right, there are different parts of a covenant. All right, number one, there is the preamble to the covenant. The preamble to the covenant. And what is that? In this section of the covenant, the person who gives or who is making the treaty, that person is named. That person is identified. So he is, his title, who he is, his relationship with the person he's signing, that is the first aspect of the covenant. Sorry, it doesn't matter. And this is typical. This is a feature of both the parity treaty covenant, parity treaty, and the suzerainty treaty. That is Suzerainty. Okay, that is there in the covenant. Good. The second aspect of the covenant, and we're going to look at how this fits into the Ten Commandments as was given. The second aspect of it is what is called the historical prologue. The historical prologue, and prologue is Prologue, right? It's the historical prologue. And what do we have here? In this aspect of the covenant, there is the recording of the relationship between the two powers or the two individuals. So it is a relationship between the power, the person who is making the agreement, the person who is making the covenant, and in the case of the vassal treaty, the subject, the vassal, the person who is going to follow through with that treaty. All right? And what that historical prologue is going to say is that they are going to keep this relationship between the person making the covenant and the vassal. All right, it is made because it is obligating the vassal to obedience because of what the giver has done in the past. All right. Now, so that is one other aspect of the covenant. There is also the third part is what we call the stipulation. And Patrick drew reference to that. What you call it, Patrick? You said the conditions and all of that? Right, that's what you call it. Okay, right. So it is now the stipulation. So here's what we have. There are going to be in this stipulation what is called a causistic, and I'm spelling that for you, CASUISTIC. There's a casuistic part or aspect to that stipulation. What's that? It is, if you do this, whenever you do this, whoever does this, then this will happen. All right? If this is done, then this is done. Okay? And that is the casuistic aspect of the stipulation. All right? Now, here is what this does. And we're going to look at some of it. Is whoever, whenever, if these things, it's the conditional thing. This punishment depends on this that you have done. This blessing depends on this what you have done. That's what we call casuistic. And we're going to look at all of that aspect in this covenant. All right? So here is what we have. The other aspect of the covenant that is being made here, there must be a provision for a place where the covenant is going to be kept. Follow me? A place where the covenant is going to be kept, almost where it is going to be deposited, a repository right where it is going to be. But there's also going to be and ought to be public reading. So not just the stipulation is important, but this covenant, this agreement is going to be placed somewhere. It is going to be placed somewhere, and it must be read during certain times. Why do you think they're asking it to be read certain times? Because the people need to be reminded of it. All right? And also, when we look at this aspect of it, what we're going to see as well, another aspect of it is going to be, there's going to be a list of witnesses. There must be witnesses to the covenant. All right? And the two other things, and then we will go back to look at how this now matches with the Sinaitic covenant. There is going to be in this covenant blessings and cursings, which is technically a part of the stipulation, but the stipulation is casuistic, as I said. This depends on this. In this case, there is in the covenant what the blessings are, what the cursings are. All right? And the final aspect about the covenant is there must be an oath to the covenant. In other words, this covenant must be ratified. And it must be ratified in a ceremony. In other words, people must see that it is being ratified. All right. So those are the aspects of the covenant. Now, what I want you to do, what we're going to do now, we're going to go to chapter 20. All right, chapter 20. And we're going to be looking now at this covenant that God is going to make with them. And what I want you to do, to look at the 10 commandments now, because why are we looking at the 10 commandments? because the Ten Commandments, the Bible says, it is the words of the covenant. All right. Look at Exodus chapter 34, I think it is. Is it? Let us look at Deuteronomy, Exodus 34. I think that's the passage. Yes. Look at Exodus chapter 34, verses 27 through to verse 28. And let's hear what this says. Deuteronomy 34, verse 27 to 28.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write these words, for according to the tenor of these words, I have made a covenant with you and with Israel." So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He neither ate bread or drank water. He wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments.
All right. So the 10 commandments are the words of the covenant. Now, here is, I want you to think with me. We're going to go back now, as I said, to chapter 20, and we're going to look at, can we see aspects of the covenant, of what a covenant should entail? Can we see that in this, in what we have just done, in terms of how it is structured? Now, the article that I really want you to read it is, because what it does, as Patrick found out, is that it talks about different types of covenants, different types of covenants that have been made. It talks about the Abrahamic covenant. It talks about the covenant made with Noah. It talks about the covenant that Job made with his eyes, the marriage covenant, all the different types of covenants that are there. All right. But what I want focusing now on is the structure. Let me ask you to think. When you go into most churches or in most places and the 10 commandments are put up there, where does it start? How does it start? Or let me ask the question another way. Where, at what point, it's writing out on tablets, looking like a tablet or something like that, right?
Yes.
Where does it normally start, begin? What verse does it? No, here. Let me ask the question this way. What verse does it normally start with?
Die.
It starts with which verse? Can you? Okay. I'm going to ask you if you ever get a chance to observe it again. Usually, it starts with verse 3. Usually, they started with verse 3. They leave out verses 1 and 2. All right. Now, based on what I just gave you about the title, the prologue, the stipulation and thing, can you relate this to the 10 commandments?
Yeah, if you start with the verse 2, you get the preamble.
Start with verse 2, you get the preamble. Are you sure? Look again. If you start with only verse 2,
verse 1 and 2.
Exactly, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, how does that illustrate the preamble?
Okay. Um, God being the Lord, like the giver of the covenant or the treaty.
Mm-hmm.
He's establishing how the vassal, which is Israel, stand or benefited when he brought them out of Egypt, and why they are now obligated to him. So that is the relationship established.
Okay, good. Good. All right. So it identifies the giver, his title, and God said, I am the Lord your God. All right. It identifies yes. It identifies the two parties. What's the other party? The persons who were brought out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of
Egypt.
slavery.
Yeah.
Now, why is this? I want to point out how this is important. Usually, when you talk to individuals who are Sabbatarian, they tell you that the Ten Commandments is for everybody. All right, God is giving the
Yeah.
commandment, right? But
Yeah.
you note, if you notice here, the person who is to be committed to this covenant are the persons who were brought out of the land of Egypt, out of slavery. You see that? I was never in the land of slavery. I was never brought out of the land of Egypt. So the Ten Commandments is not directed at me. You see that?
Yeah. That's true.
All right. Okay. Um, here is we're about 5 minutes before the break. Now, we when we look at the historical prologue, we will see that in verses 1 and 2. All right, where it is this covenant is based on something historical. What is that historical thing? Verses 1 and 2. Um, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery? You see that? So,
Yeah.
so that,
That's
so you can identify that, right?
yeah.
All
Very
right.
clear.
Now, let us look now at where the stipulation is. Where would you put the stipulation aspect of the covenant? Where would you
Uh,
place?
okay. That would be
Remember what the stipulation is.
yeah. I think it is earlier on in chapter 19. The condition for Israel to be his people is um, when they obey his commands.
All right, but can't you find that in the 10 in verse 20 in chapter 20? All right.
Mm,
All right, let me show you.
okay.
Let me show you. Okay, yeah, go on.
Um,
Look at, mhm.
that would be verse 5. There's a bit of it there.
All right. So let me make it
Even
easier for you. It would start from verses 3, right from verse 3 to verse 6. Watch this. After it says, you shall have no other gods before me, you shall not make for yourselves any carved image. That's verse 4. Verse 5 says, for I, the Lord, am a jealous God. Here is the consequence now, right? Here is the
yeah,
thing. Um, visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children and the third and generation, but showing steadfast love to thousands who keep it. So the question is, if you don't keep it, this is what happens. Whoever keeps it, this is what happens. You see that? So that's the stipulation that we have in verses um, in verses 6, verses 3 to 6. Now, where now does it have the provision for the temple and the public reading? Can you identify that here? Where would that fall in?
That would be 8.
Perfect. Verses 8 to 8. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You see what I'm saying? Remember the
Yeah.
Sabbath day to keep it holy. In other words, it is in the temple that they're going to come and hear the reading of the Ten Commandments, reading of the law, right there. Okay, and then it talks about now the list of the witnesses. Watch this. The list of the witnesses is going to come in verses 10. In fact, from verses 8 to 12, we have the provision for the reading, but specifically verses 10 to 11, we have, watch this. On it, you shall do no work. Here are the witnesses now. Or your son, or your daughters, or your male servant, or your female servant, or your livestock, or your sojourner who is within your gates. Those are witnesses to it, and they must be made. That's a list of the witnesses that must be made to be observing it as well. You see what I'm saying? And
Yes.
then when we come down now to the end of it all, right down to verses 8 to 11, and when we go down from verses 12 right down to verse 17, we're going to have again the blessings and the curses at the stipulation. You shall not do this, you shall not do this, you shall not do this. All right. So that is basically the word that how the covenant is structured. All right. It's quarter to 11 now. I want us to take our break now, and then we're gonna come back at the usual time, 11 o'clock, and we're going to look at how some other things about how the law is unveiled. And we're going to go through to chapter 31. All right?
All
Okay,
right.
then.
All right.
Let's take our break.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, man. No problem.
I got your message. I put Chip back on there.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry, Chipper.
No worries.
All
I,
right.
I was in a good Haggai class.
Mhm. All right. What I'm gonna ask that you could okay. What you could possibly do then, Chip, is to where you got knocked off, you could go to the you could catch up with the video.
I was here. I was just
Okay.
in backstage. I was listening.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
No problem.
if they're in backstage, Eddie, they can still hear everything. You just
Okay.
can't see them. Okay.
All right. All right. No,
So all right.
all right. Um well, Patrick is back on. All right. I'm gonna begin. So we have looked at what the structure of a covenant, and because the Ten Commandments are the words of the covenant, we looked at how the structure of a covenant in terms of the preamble, the historical prologue, and all of that, how that we can actually impose that on the Sinaitic covenant, the Ten Commandments being the words of the covenant, and we can see how that unfolds. Now, what we want to do, what we move on to do, we're going to um, do a quick but not superficial, mind you, but we're going to do a broad survey of chapters 20 to 31 because during this chapter, as we said, this is where the whole covenant is being presented. And so we want to look at so we're going to be flipping through the different chapters from verses 20 to 31. And we have covered verse 20 in the first half of the class. Now, when we look at the chapters between 20 and 31, because chapter 32 deals with the breaking of the covenant, the golden calf, and all of that. In chapter 20 to 31, these chapters, what we're going to see that they are dealing with the laws, the promises, and they include the civil and religious laws and principles that God is giving with the intention that they will be guided by them, and this is what is going to be used now to regulate their society. So we're going to have in this section, there are going to be religious laws and principles. There are also going to be civil laws. And as I said, these laws are going to be designed and are designed to govern the society, to monitor the behavior of those within the society. Remember that they were made a kingdom of priests. They were made a kingdom of priests for a particular purpose. They were made a priestly nation for a particular purpose. Now, I want us to look at two passages here. I want us to look at Romans chapter 2, verses 17 to 21. And also, we are going to be looking at Galatians chapter 3. So, let's look first of all. All right, let me give you the two passages that I want us to read. The first is Galatians chapter 2, verse 17 to 21, and the other is Galatians chapter 3, and we are going to be looking at verses 19 to 20. All right, so let us look at Romans chapter 2, verse 17 to 21, and Galatians chapter 3, verses 19 and 20. Let's hear it.
But if you bear the name Jew and rely upon the law and boast in God and know his will and approve the things that are essential, being instructed out of the law, and are confident that you yourself, a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, a corrector of the foolish, a teacher of the immature, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and of truth, you, therefore, who teach another, do you not teach yourselves? You who preach that one shall not steal, do you steal? I can keep going if you want.
Yeah, okay. Essentially, I wanted verse 21. We can stop there because we get the point. And the point is that they were there to be God's representative on the earth. They were there to shine and to uphold right living and righteousness on the face of the earth. The law is given there to govern them, to be a state, a nation that would preserve righteousness on the earth. Now look at chapter 2, verses 19 to 20 of Galatians.
You mean 3?
Chapter 3, sorry. Galatians chapter 3, verse 19 and 20.
Why the law then? It was added because of transgressions, having been ordained through angels by the agency of a mediator, until the seed would come to whom the promise had been made.
All right. Now, here is the purpose of the law. Here is the purpose of the God shaping the nation and the purpose for their becoming his prized possession. There are 3 reasons as we see in these 2 verses. Number 1, they were there to uphold righteousness. The law was given to uphold righteousness, to keep righteousness alive on the earth. That's one purpose. The second purpose was to point out sin. Paul asked a question, why then was the law given? He answers it by saying it was added because of transgression. The fact that it was added suggests that it was not there originally. It came later on, and Galatians 3 is going to tell us that it came 430 years after the promise. And we know that that was about the time, the length of time that the Israelites stayed in Egypt, about 430 years. So Paul is saying that it was one, to keep righteousness alive on the earth. Secondly, it was there to point out sin. And the third reason the law was given was to preserve the seed promise. It was added to preserve the seed promise. It was added because of transgression till the seed should come. So that, why preserve the seed promise? So that the promise that God made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about through your seed all the nations of the earth will be blessed, that seed promise would not be compromised by intermarriage and all of that, interrelationship with other people. It was to preserve the lineage of Jesus Christ. So those are the three reasons why the law was given. So when we look at these chapters, from chapter 20 to chapter 31, we call...
Eddie.
Yes. Yes, Patrick.
Eddie.
Yes.
With regards to the point 2, does it mean where the law is not known does not mean sin is not present?
No. Doesn't mean that. Not at all. And I'm glad you asked that question. Not at all. And in quick answer to that question, let us look at Romans chapter 5. All right, Romans chapter 5. And this is a passage that you need to remember when people ask you that question. Romans chapter 5. All right, and let us look at verse 12, verses 13, chapter 5 and verse 13 of Romans. All right, here is the point. Paul says,
Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men, because all sinned. 13. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed when there is no law.
Read the next verse.
14. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who had not sinned, according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who is a type of him who was to come.
Now, there are a lot of truths in this passage that we need to keep in mind. All right? Where your King James says, for until the law, sin was in the world, here's what it means. For sin was indeed in the world before the law was given. So people were sinning before the law was given. So the law, the 10 Commandments, is not an indicator of sin. Because here you have people who are sinning before the law was given. Paul says the law was added because of transgression. Okay, but here's something now.
It defines the sin. It would define the sin.
Yeah, it will point out what sin is, but it does not mean that because the sin because the Ten Commandment system is absent, then we don't know what sin is. No. But here is something else. How do we know that sin was in the world? Well, death reigned. And as a consequence of sin, there is death. The fact that there is death means that there was sin before the law was given. But here is something interesting. During what time period did the law was the law not present? From Adam to Moses.
Mhm.
During that time period, there was no Ten Commandment covenant system, none. All right, so this verse is important. All right, answer the question, Patrick.
Eddie?
Very clear, sir. Thank you.
Yes, yes, Chip.
Um, so I totally understand what you're saying here. From Adam to Moses, there is no law until now. So when we're reading in Genesis and we read about all, God was disappointed and men were just full of sin. What at that point determined sin? Was it a conscious thing and people knew better? Like how what did it, I mean, I guess we don't really know, I guess, exactly, because I just got done studying Genesis and there's not a true definition minus disobedience to God as sin per se.
Okay, here is something. There are a couple of things we need to remember. Sin was there because whatever God commands that we violate becomes sin. Sin is the transgression of the law. Which law? Any law that God gives. All right? But here is something now. I want to point this out to you. Sin must not be traced back to any law. Watch me. Sin must not be traced and is not traced back to any law. Sin must be traced back to God's nature. Good? Sin is sin because of God's nature. There are times when God will command things that we think is wrong. Let me give you a practical example. Is it wrong to kill? Yes. It is against God's law. Don't take a man's life, don't kill. Right? But here's the point. Saul was told to utterly destroy the Amalekites. He didn't do it. He sinned. So in not utterly destroying all, not killing all, he sinned. He should have killed all. But I thought you're not supposed to kill. You see, sin must be traced back to God's nature, not because of a law. Let me give you one particular point if you're going to use the Ten Commandments. What's the greatest commandment in the law? What's the greatest commandment?
Thou shalt love your
To love God.
Love God. Do you know that the greatest commandment is not in the 10? the, in the Ten Commandments, there is no command to love, yet it's the greatest commandment. Where do we find the command to love? In that aspect of the law that people falsely call the ceremonial law. It is not in the 10. It's in that aspect of the law that people call the ceremonial law. And there's no ceremonial law as different from a moral law. No. You see, so what I'm saying, I make the point again. Good question, Chip. The point is, sin must be traced to God's nature, who God is, not because of any law. All right. So that's the point.
Brother.
Uh, yeah.
So, uh, as well, can we say that as soon as Adam and Eve ate about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, uh, beginning on that time, they knew when they were sinning?
Yes. They sinned and they knew it because they broke God's commandment. They were driven out of the All right. They were driven out of the Garden of Eden, not because they broke any of the 10, but because they broke the commandment of God. Don't eat of that tree.
They didn't need the commandments, though. There was no sin until they ate of the tree.
Right. Okay. Here's my. I'm gonna. But let me ask you a question. The 10 Commandments says, honor thy father and thy mother. Question. Who was Adam's mother? Did Adam have a mother?
The dust.
No.
No. Okay. The 10 Commandments says, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Who was Adam's neighbor? You see, the point I'm trying to make here is that God is not going to give you a command that it is impossible to keep. Did Adam and Eve sin? Yes. Did they break the 10? Did they break the 10 Commandments? No. Did they break the command of God? Yes. So it's important for us to understand what sin is. Sin is the transgression of any law that God gives. All right. Okay. Now, let's look at some things here. In the 5 books of Moses, all right, these 5 books are called different names, and each of the names give us a different aspect or nuance or feature characteristic about the Old Testament system. Watch this. We're told that sometimes these chapters are called, that is chapter 20 or whatever, these are called the Torah. The Torah, right? Torah, the Torah. And what that means is the guidance or the teachings, the Torah. Sometimes it is called the Pentateuch. What that means is here we have the 5 books of Moses, written by Moses. It is sometimes called the Decalogue. And what that means, it means the 10 words that are composed of codes, regulation, rules. So you have the Torah, you have the Pentateuch, you have the Decalogue, or the 10 words. Now, here is what is crucial. We cannot, and the Bible doesn't teach this, we cannot and we must not interpret a part of these 5 books of Moses, a part of the law, apart from the book of the law as they're called, and treat them so distinct and different that one part is abolished and the other remains. We cannot say there's a moral aspect to the law and there's a ceremonial aspect of the law, and they're so different that the ceremonial aspect of the law is abolished, but the moral aspect still stands. That's unscriptural. That the Bible doesn't teach that. If one part of the law is gone, then the whole package is gone. And the whole package is gone because we are under a New Testament. Now, here is the point. The entire Old Testament system, ordinances, laws, regulations, all of that, as was given to the children of Israel, was abolished at the cross when Jesus said, "It is finished." Right? So you can't have one aspect remaining while the other is gone. No, all of it is gone. That was taken out of the way, served its purpose when Jesus died on the cross and said, "It is finished." Now, here is something I want you to and this I want to see in your notes. We can divide the law, these chapters, we can divide chapter 20 to 31, these laws that are contained in these chapters, in terms of their structure. Watch this, watch me. In terms of their structure, there are 2 aspects to the law. There's one that is called the apodeitic aspect. I'm going to spell that for you. APODEICTIC. Hope I'm pronouncing it right. The apodeitic aspect. APODIECTIC. There's another structural form of the law, and we looked at part of it earlier, causistic. CAUISTIC. So there are apodeitic laws and causistic laws. What are the apodeitic laws? These are the laws that are absolute. They're absolute commands without exception. Absolute commands without exceptions. Apodeitic. How does that form come? Thou shalt not. Thou shalt. So when you go through these verses, you're going to see thou shalt not, thou shalt. That is apodeitic. There's also, as we said earlier, the causistic laws. And what are these? These are the laws that begin with if or when. If or when. Now, there are some laws that begin, causistic, that begins with who or whosoever. And they are social, civil, judicial laws. All right, let me show you something. Look at chapter 21. I'm going to show you something. Look at verse 17 and verse 18. Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die, but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time and shall have him thoroughly healed. Okay, look at verse 28. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free. Okay, if you go through, look at chapter 22, verse 19. If a man gives to his
Eddie,
neighbor, yes, go on.
the first reading, the chapter, please.
Chapter 21, verses 18 and 19.
Okay, thank you.
What I'm saying, when you go through these laws, these causistic laws, it says, if or when, then. Whoever does this, then. If he does this, then. Whenever he does this, then. Those are causistic laws, they call them.
So
And
those are
what
basically
are
cause and effects.
Right, exactly. Perfect. So, and if you run through chapter 20 through to 31, you will see these laws coming up. But now here is something. These laws are social civil laws. Some of them are capital and non-capital laws. So if you do this, you shall be stoned. If you do this, you shall die. If you do this, then you do. Is what I'm saying? So some of them come under the category of capital and non-capital laws. Now, what's the difference between the capital and the non-capital law? And you're going to tell me, oh, one has the punishment of death and the other one not the punishment of death, right? And I'm going to tell you, yes, you're right. But that's not what I'm looking at now. All right? What the capital laws, that is those that require death, those laws are offensive and they threaten the covenant with God. If these laws threaten the covenant with God, it is going to be a capital offense. So if a person is caught practicing idolatry, they shall be put to death. Okay? There are some social civil laws that do not call for death. All right? Okay, let me show you something. In Exodus chapter, yeah.
So the capital offense would call for death.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the non-capital would not.
Would not. All right. Okay. It might cause for it might be called for you pay back something or you do some work or something like that. All right. But now here is something else now. We also have in these um in these verses, in these chapters, between chapters 21 verse 18 to 20 and chapter 22 and 17, these laws are civil.
Exodus, Eddie, please come with the chapters again.
Okay, Exodus 21 verses 18 to 20 and 22 and verse 17. Between those passages, the laws that are listed here, they are civil laws. All right? They're civil laws.
Are
And
these also non-capital?
right. Good. And they're non-capital. Well, how are they settled? They're settled by compensation. All right? So they are settled by compensation. Now, another aspect of these civil laws is this: they are addressed directly. They come in the form of a direct address. So it is not communicated through a third party. It is directly addressed to the person. All right. Look at chapter 23, verse 1 to 9. I won't read all of it, but watch this. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to do malicious witness. You shall not fail in which the in with you should not fall in with the many to do evil. In other words, I am telling you directly. All right? Don't lie. Don't bear false witness. Don't come to court and said, I said this when I didn't. Don't do it. Those are the civil laws that God is using to guide them. All right? So they are directly related to the person. Now, I want you to notice something. Look at chapter 21, chapter 23, and verse 12.
Eddie,
Chapter
the chapters are mixing up. You just said
You're
chapter
missing them?
21 and 23.
Okay. Did you get chapter 20? The one I read, 21, 18 to 20, and 22, 17? Did you get those? Okay. I
No.
also gave, no, it is between chapters 21, 18 to 20, and 22 up to verse 17. These are civil laws. All right.
22. The 22 is a chapter or a verse?
22, 17.
22, 17. Okay. All right.
Right.
Thank
Then we have, as I said, those that have direct address. And that is Exodus 23, 1 to 9. Look at chapter 23 and verse 12. "6 days you shall do your work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. Your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed." God is giving laws about how the Sabbath and the feast days should be kept. All right. So here we have in chapter 23 of Exodus, we also have instructions on how worship and the festivals should be observed. So if you go through the chapter, you will see how worship, their religious life, their civil life, their social life, their judicial life, how all of that um, should be achieved. All right, so that is how the laws are structured, and I'm saying all of that was given to them Mount on Mount Sinai. All right. Now, here is something else. Here is something else that I want you to look at. All right. Now, what is important is what, and I'm just going to give you these references because for time's sake. All right. I want you to see what the Bible calls the law, how the New Testament, including Jesus Christ, looks and understood these first 5 books of Moses. They're going to be called the law. Watch this. I'm going to give them to you and we won't read them. Genesis 3:16. In 1 Corinthians 14:34, it is called the law. Good. Exodus 20, verse 17 and verse 28. Romans 7 and verse 7 calls it the law. Leviticus 19:18 is called the law in Matthew 22, verse 36 to 40. Tell me if I'm going too fast.
Can you pick it again? Genesis 3:16
is
for
called
1 Corinthians 14:34.
Yeah. Exodus 20, 17 to 28 is called the law in Romans 7 and verse 7. Leviticus 19, verse 18 is called the law in Matthew 22, verse 36 to 40. Numbers 28, verse 9. Numbers 28 and verse 9 is called the law in Matthew 12:5. Deuteronomy 6 and verse 3 and Deuteronomy 24:16 is called the law in Matthew 22, verse 36 to 40. What is the point here? The Pentateuch, the first 5 books of Moses, all of it is called the law in the New Testament. It is seen as the law, the Torah. All right? Now here is something. What we need to understand is that the giving of the law, all right? The giving of the law and the ratification of the law comes between Exodus 19:5 and Exodus 24:7 to 8. So the chapters between Exodus 19:5 and Exodus 24:7 to 8. What do we have in these two blocks of passages, bookends if you call them. They contain the giving and the ratification of the law. Now, I need us to read, I want us to read these two passages. All right? What was given on Mount Sinai and what the people must pledge their obedience to are the bylaws. Watch this, the bylaws, the ordinances, the statutes, the judgments, and the Decalogue. Right? And these constitute, in fact, the Decalogue constitutes the words of the covenant. So, what was given on Sinai? Bylaws, statutes, judgments, ordinances. The Decalogue was also given, that is the 10 words, the 10 commandments, we call them. That is the words of the covenant. That's what Exodus 34, 27 to 28 tells us. I will read it again. Now, here is something that I want you to see. Look at Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 13 to 14. And I want to show you something. Nehemiah 9, 13 to 14. Nehemiah 9, 13 to 14. Can I find Nehemiah?
Alrighty, let's see. Nehemiah 9, 13, and 14 says, Then you came down on Mount Sinai and spoke with them from heaven. You gave them just ordinances and true laws, good statutes and commands. So you made known to them your holy Sabbath and laid down for them commandments, statutes, laws through your servant Moses.
Go on. Okay, that's what verse 13 and 14.
Yes.
All right.
You want me to keep going?
Things. No, that's it. Couple things. You came down on Mount Sinai, and what did you give? Name them. What did you give?
He gave he gave statutes, ordinances, laws, commandments.
He gave statutes, ordinances, laws, and commandments. Wait a minute.
Commandments.
That was given. All of that is one package that was given on Sinai. Now, here is something. What did he make known at Sinai?
What did God make known?
The Holy Sabbath.
The Holy Sabbath. The Holy Sabbath was made known at Sinai. What does the phrase made known imply?
It was not known before.
It was never was.
In other words, before Sinai, nobody knew about a Sabbath. Nobody knew about a Sabbath. They could not have known about a Sabbath before it was made known. So for you to say that the Sabbath was kept from creation cannot be true if this is right. Because it was made known means that nobody knew about it before. But people will tell you, well, they were to keep the Sabbath from Exodus 16. That's not Mount Sinai. But here is the point. They are on the Sinai Peninsula. You see, so the question is, nobody knew or kept a Sabbath before the children of Israel left Egypt. Or put another way, it was only after they left Egypt that the Sabbath was made known, not before. All right, now watch this. Here's what I want us to look at now. So the whole package of the law and what it means technically, not really technically, but it's found from chapter 19 to chapter 30. All of those chapters involve the giving of the law and the law. All right, we have the preparation in chapter 19 and verse 20. We have the Decalogue in verse 20. And from 21 to 31 to 30, 21 to 30, we have the whole package of the law being given. So the law was not, the covenant was not only just the 10. It was all of these laws that were made known at Sinai, according to Nehemiah chapter 9. All right. Now that's important. Now, why?
Eddie.
Yes.
Eddie.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
with Exodus, the chapter spanning from 19 to 30 contains the laws, ordinances, statutes, judgment, and decalogue.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Right. So the law is not just chapter 20. So it contains statutes, judgment, ordinances, all of that. All right. Now, I want you to notice something here now. When you look at the commandments, that is the 10. The 10 commandments does not start with a commandment. Follow me. It doesn't start with a commandment. When we look at the preamble, it starts with a statement declaring God's nature. 1. 2, it begins not only with a statement of God's nature, but it begins a statement of God's action.
Reminder.
I am the Lord that brought you out of Egypt. I am your Redeemer. Good. I was the one who provided salvation. That's the first 2 verses. What does it do then afterwards? After that, this is how you must obey me. Don't have any other gods before me. Don't do this. Remember the Sabbath day. This is what you are being called to obey. So the second commandment declares that they must not worship other idols. They must not take his name in vain, either in speech or action. That's all right. Then you must worship. The rest of the commandment comes the nation's social, and economic life. Do not kill. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Do not do this. Do not do this. All right? That's a structure. Now, here is what I want us to notice. All right? The order of the commandments. It expresses what is called a scale, SCALE, a scale of values and a scale of priorities. So in the Ten Commandments, we see a scale of values and a scale of priorities. What is that? God comes first. Right? God comes first. 2, he is Yahweh or Jehovah alone. He is the only true God. Therefore, worship him. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And then do good to your fellow men. Don't do this, don't kill, don't bear false witness, don't do all of that kind of thing. So, that's a scale of values. All right? Now, so here's what we have. Let's see if we can.
The scale of values and priorities are the values and priorities are what you just stated.
Yes. So
God
you have
comes first. Second,
he alone
Jehovah
is the true
alone.
God.
Yeah, true God.
Then he
Then
must
the
be
Sabbath.
worshipped, right? Keep the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Then your duty towards your fellow men. All right? Now,
all right.
Let me do this for you. All right. Let me see if let me do this. So what we have as we sum up, what we have in chapters 19 to 31 or to 30 is this. We have in chapter 19 the great call to Israel, chapter 19. In chapter 20, we have the basis of their moral life. That is the Decalogue, the basis of their moral life. In chapter 21, we have their rules of justice. In chapter 22, we have property ownership. Property ownership and community standards in chapter 22. In chapter 23, we have the laws for the celebration of the festivals. All right. In chapter 24, we have the ratification of the covenant. That's in chapter 24. And then from chapter 25 through to the end, we have what we call the epilogue, chapter 25 to chapter 30 then. So that basically is chapters 19 to 31. When we come back tomorrow, when we get back tomorrow, let me look at my syllabus. What we're going to look at is tomorrow, we're going to look at the building of the tabernacle in chapter 25 to 31. All right, we're going to look at the building of the tabernacle. So we just looked at how the preparation and unveiling of the covenant, and then 25 to 31 tomorrow we look at the tabernacle, what it means. All right. Any questions, comments about the class, and any take homes? Nothing?
All right. Eddie.
Yes.
With today's lesson, I have learned today that with the covenant that we have with God, we are not the makers of the covenant, since it is a Vasa treaty or a Swaziland treaty. It is God who spells out the covenant for us to obey. That is what I've learned today.
And let me point out something to you. In the New Testament, though, we voluntarily enter that covenant. So, in other words, we weren't under the Old Testament system. Once your family was a Jew, Israelite, you automatically became a part of the Israelite system.
Covenant.
In the New Testament, it is my willingness to enter into a contract with God. In other words, it is when I decide to give my life to Christ and to be buried in his son and to raise to walk in news of life. That in fact is that Jesus says, they shall not all be taught of me. Right? They shall all be taught of me. They shall all be taught of me. So they are going to now learn of me, and then they will come. But I take your point. You are so right. Anybody else? All right. Anybody else? Okay. What I'm going to ask that you do, please, is in your time that you have, you need to read that article on the covenant. It's important. All right. Okay. All right. Chip, you want to dismiss us, please?
Thank you, Lord, so much for another opportunity to come to class, to be able to feast on these wonderful words that you've given to us for wisdom and for guidance and understanding you and the relationship that we need to have with you. We're so thankful for Brother Eddie taking all the time that he has to present us with such a rich class that truly bridges all of your words from the old and the new. Thank you so much for all of our students that we have making time for you and trying to put you first in their lives and trying to be equipped to help others know you and understand what it is that you need us to do for you. God, we are just so thankful for the opportunities that you give us on a daily basis. Help us to be gracious and appreciative and humble. Help our prideful sides die away with our flesh and help us to live a life that is pleasing and worthy of you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
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 All right. Remember that you have until next week, Friday, to give me the second aspect of the subject. All right.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. No problem. All right then.
Amen, brothers. Amen. Good class, Fisha.
Yes, sir. Oh,
I was listening. Stop the stream.